Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is another edition of the Envision Speaker Series. Once again, I'm here with Natalie Weaver and Brenda Yoho, and they were here last time because we took an in-depth look. Natalie shared her story of trauma, and so she grew up in a very unhealthy environment, and she was willing to share all of that pain with all of us. But even with her bio says that she's living her best life now. We need to dive into that. We need to figure out how that can possibly be. How did you transition your mindset to say, this is my best life and it's only getting better? And Brenda's going to share in part of that story. So let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back. First, welcome back to the show. And let's get how can this possibly be? Now, how can you possibly say that you're living your best life now? How does that work?
So I think it started a long time ago for me. I remember being 9 years old and my mother's boyfriend at the time had left. And I just remember everybody crying. And I knew at that time, I told myself I was never going to live like that. Like I made a promise to myself then and there. I wanted things to be different. And while I couldn't do that while I lived at home, I just, something in me made the choice that no matter what you go through as a child, that once you turn of age, once you are able to make your own choices, it is your job and responsibility to kind of do something about that. So one of the first things obviously I did was enrolled in counseling because I knew I needed it. So that was one of my things and my promise to myself to do better, to be able to give better, because to care for others, we have to care for ourselves too. And it's like, I don't want to be a hypocrite telling people to do things that I wouldn't myself do, especially as a psych nurse. There's some component of that where you want to practice what you preach.
So it it's still, I'm still challenged because you didn't grow up with any kind of positive role models except maybe Brenda next to you, and some other folks who you've not named. But to make the conscious adult decision to seek treatment because of everything that you've experienced takes some insight. What would have inspired you, please, to say, I need to figure out all this stuff and make sense of it and heal from it? Because part of that does require healing. Yes?
Yes, it definitely. And there was a lot of people that, I guess it's one thing I want to stress here, is people do not realize the impact, even saying hello or just one day in somebody's life that you meet somebody that they may have the largest effect on your life. Like only meeting somebody one time. And I had people like that throughout my life that I would meet that would show me, different things about my life weren't normal. And it's like, you don't know how abnormal your life is until you see what normal is. So once I started seeing more and more what normal was, I wanted more, or not normal. I guess I'd say average, because a normal is a setting on a dryer.
All
It's
good, all good.
so, your average household, your happy, healthy household, that's, as I started seeing that, I realized how messed up that my childhood had been, but you don't know until you have a chance to see. And so once I saw, I wanted something different for myself. And in addition to Brenda and other people, I had, my father who tried to be present, but again, my mother would even stop him from being present. I mean, she went to the extent of grounding me from church. So even the people that I knew there that could help me, I didn't have a lot of access to. I wasn't allowed extracurriculars. I wasn't allowed to leave the house or go anywhere. So it's really, like I said, those small little things, like the one time you might get out and see somebody that really helps you make up your mind you're going to do different. Another thing I didn't share last time was I was misdiagnosed at the age of 13 with oppositional defiant disorder and 15 with bipolar disorder. And that followed me for 15 years. It's just about 2 years ago that I was actually properly diagnosed with ADHD and PTSD and generalized anxiety disorder. But I was being treated for the wrong thing. So it kind of hindered my efforts, because being medicated for the wrong thing, I had 5 adult suicide attempts. So that did hinder wanting to make things better. But I guess in general, it was just a promise to myself. And that was the biggest thing I wanted to keep, is I did not want to repeat what I had gone through. I knew I wasn't going to have kids. I knew very early on. Like, did I want kids? Do I want kids? Yes, but I wanted to make sure I was a healthy enough person first, not to pass on trauma, because I know that trauma has a generational component to it, and until somebody puts their foot down and says it stops here, it's going to keep going.
I want to go back a little bit because there's a gap here in our story, and Brenda is a part of that. So
Mhm.
when you were, um, y- you two met each other and kind of knew each other and did the whole journaling thing
Yes.
in your middle school years. But there, then you lost each other. Like there was a point in life where Brenda was no longer in your life.
Yes, and that was actually very traumatic because we got evicted and a policeman came to my door and started throwing our stuff out on the lawn. I never got to say goodbye to Brenda. So like all of a sudden Brenda was out of my life and
So
I
can you
would
talk about that just a little bit? Because we didn't mention that last time we were here. How did that, what in the world? A policeman came to your door?
He did. My mother was not paying the rent because she refused to work because she wanted to get disability or whatever she was trying to do. Or, she was also really good at mismanaging money. I don't understand it myself. But the landlord and the police showed up at the door with an eviction notice and started throwing our stuff out on the front lawn,
No, do
said,
you literally mean throwing? I mean, because
yeah,
that's,
they literally, like, there were three men that came into my house. My
oh,
mother left me there with them. I was supposed to go to school that day. She left me there with them to go get a U-Haul, and we all started just chucking the stuff out on the lawn. They did not care about our stuff. They wanted it out of the house because the rent wasn't paid, so they did not care.
right. So you had to leave. You
Yes.
left. You left school, the home, everything. And so
Hmm.
Brenda was no longer part of your life.
No.
Talk to me about, wait, Brenda?
One important thing though, she had the journals.
Yes.
So those didn't disappear. She
Okay.
still had those journals. So I wasn't present.
Well, let's put all the pieces together
Yeah.
because when we talked last, she said she rarely took them home. She left them at school intentionally because she didn't want to get herself in trouble anymore.
Mhm.
So let's kind of put the pieces here. You didn't go to school, you're thrown out of your house. Where are the journals then,
So
physically speaking?
I don't remember exactly. I think at some point I brought them home more because I didn't really care. Like, when you get, for lack of a better word, the hell beat out of you every day, you don't care anymore. It doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't bother you because it's just what it is. And so I just started learning how to hide things. And so I'd hide them. And so that, I think that's how I got away with having them, or I'd take them to, like, I went to my dad's every other weekend. So if I had something I really wanted to keep that I knew I didn't want her to know about, I would take them to his house. And so that was probably, I don't remember for sure, but probably what I did and how I ended up keeping them.
So throughout middle school, you wrote back and forth. This
Mhm.
was a transitioning point in your life. Now you have them. At least you know where they are. Brenda, she's gone. And what did you do once, like, you never saw her and she just said there was no goodbye.
Mm-mm.
How did that
No,
work for you?
yeah. So there was no goodbye. And so she was gone. And oftentimes that happens to many of us as educators. We have a lot of kids that just parents take them and they leave and we don't really have any more contact with them. There's some things we can control, some things we can't. So of course I worried about her and where she was and was hoping that she was doing fine, and was very anxious about where she was, because at the time when she left, I left too. So I was able to say goodbye to the kids at the school, because I was moving and I told them where I was going. I was going to another school district. But see, she didn't know that because she wasn't there for me to tell her where I was going. So it took a little while, but we found each other.
Well, let's not jump the gun a bit.
Yeah.
Now she's in high school. She's in a brand new
Mhm.
school again, still in the same living environments, just different physically somewhere. She's still got to survive 3 more years of her
Mhm.
life before
Mhm.
she escapes. And that's the word you used. So what was high
Mhm.
school like?
High school was a lot different than middle school. I think in a way I knew in my heart, I either had to like give up who I was and like my fight for a while, or else I was going to kill myself. Like I was so tired of fighting at that point that I knew I had to go about it a more creative way. And so I internalized everything, like everything that, the talking out of turn, the arguing, the trying to, talk sense into anybody just stopped because I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to make it out. So it's like I would journal. So, I did still journal in high school and stuff. And, I would keep them in my backpack with my books because my mom never looked in my backpack or anything. She was too busy doing her own stuff. And so, I would do that. Obviously there was, the self-harm that lasted through high school, but I mean, essentially it was one of those things in high school where things were still bad. They got a little less bad over time. They got a little better in some ways and worse than others. When I was in high school, we did not have hot water, heat, or a working stove for most of 3 years. So, that meant, boiling water and carrying it across a trailer. That meant,
And we're talking like all seasons, like,
all seasons.
yeah.
And I lived in a trailer. You could see daylight through the cracks in the walls.
Okay.
And so, I had a lot going on then too. And then my mother got into this habit where she would be with 2 or 3 guys at one time, or she'd be like getting with somebody as she was breaking up with somebody else. We had a lot of breakups, had our lives threatened a lot. And somebody had tried to break in one night while I was home alone with my brother. I was probably about 14 or 15 at the time. So, it was really rough, but I knew that I didn't want her to win. And so at that rate, it wasn't,
Talk to me about that mentality. What is that mentality?
so I call it instead of love and light, it's hustle and spite. Some people are all, oh, love and light. No, teen me was hustle and spite. Like I was ready to get out of there, whatever it meant. And that meant killing my personality for a little while. So I didn't actually kill myself because it's like, I knew it's just like when she would hit me. If I cried, I knew she won because she would just keep hitting you. It's like, I don't know if she enjoyed seeing you cry or what, but it's like once she won, once she had that one up over you, there was no coming back from that and it wasn't going to get better. So you learn little ways to take your wins and take them quietly. And how I did that is I just wouldn't interact. She couldn't take anything from me. I didn't go anywhere. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I wasn't allowed to have friends. So what else can you take from somebody that you've taken everything from?
So you still have your journal. What are you putting in? And I'm going to add you to the conversation, Brenda. Hold on.
No.
What are you putting in your journal now to keep your mind sane?
I definitely started doing some poetry because like I said, I was in counseling for a little while. So I would make little doodles or like, I would write poetry, or sometimes it would just be like a giant, like, screw you, so and so. And, it would just be like a giant page that said just that. So sometimes it was just like a cathartic, like nonsensical expletive page full of I hate you and I hate the world and I hate everything. Some days, there were good days, not very many, but sometimes there were, good things that would happen. But
Well, that's okay because expression of your emotion is okay. As long as you're not getting violent with somebody, you can freely be you.
absolutely. And I think that's what saved me because, like, as soon as I got into high school, it became very clear to me I couldn't keep up that way. I wasn't. And then my mother married this man who was very threatening. And when her and I would argue, he would step in and be like, you're not going to do that, or I'm going to come after you. Because they always used to like try to challenge me. And the problem with him is like, it's not that I was afraid of him, because I wasn't afraid of anything as a kid. Like I would fight anybody because I already knew what it was like to lose. So I didn't have to win. I just had to be there and stand up for myself. But he towered over me. He was twice my size. He was over 6 foot tall. Like there was nothing I was going to do. If he wanted to stop me, he was going to stop me. And that's when I realized like it was no longer worth the fight. I had to do something to make it out and make it out intact enough that therapy could fix what had been done.
So how did you get out?
Well,
what's that story?
So that story is I was in high school. I had been in chorus that's the one thing I enjoyed in school was chorus. Always had a great grade in there. I loved to sing. I still love to sing. I find it very cathartic. But but I gave it up my junior year for what's called dual enrollment classes. So I could go to the community college and take classes there for both high school and college credit. And I got my CNA certification at 16 years old.
Cool.
Yeah. And so when I was 17, I was still going to church when I could. And I got in with this lady who knew this guy that was the trustee for a mother and a daughter. And he wanted me to come work for them. And so I waited till close enough to my 18th birthday. So it was just a couple months, but close enough basically that if I went ahead and left and she called the police, they'd probably laugh in her face and be like, she's 2 or 3 months from being 18. What do you want us to do? Kind of thing. Because she was always very controlling and wanted me under her thumb at all costs. So I had to be careful about how I carried it out, but that's kind of the short of how I kind of got out. But I left with nothing. And it was really hard at first because I did not know how to function without being in a constant state of chaos, fear, upheaval in some way.
Mhm. At some point, the two of you found each other, or were you looking for each other, or was it just kind of like, oh, here you are? How did that work?
So yeah,
Well, you can add to this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's really funny because I don't remember how I saw that Brenda was working where she was working at, but I figured out, I don't know how I got your address, but I'd gotten a hold of an address. And so I sent her a letter, just
Whoa,
basically
whoa, wait, what? You said you wrote her a letter?
I hand wrote her a letter and sent it to her
Oh,
through the mail.
Mhm.
And I don't remember what all it said, but basically I think the take home of it was, thank you very much. You will never know how much you helped me, and you're part of the reason I'm still here.
wow. Brenda, you remember receiving that letter?
Yeah, I do. I was sitting in my office as the director of educational support programs, and we get our mail from the the warehouse guys bring our mail, so we get it in bulk. And so my secretary put letters and mail on my desk, and she goes, "You might want to look at this one. This one's a little different. It's handwritten. You don't get things like this very often." And it was really thick. So I want to say it was like 4 pages long. It wasn't just a little letter.
Oh, okay.
And so she wrote things in there, and it was very touching about how much she wanted to thank me and how grateful she was, and that she still had the journals, and that she'd utilized those all of the years, and how she went back to them several different times to reread the words that I had written, and that she would really like to meet me if I had the time. Well, of course I would have the time. And so I called her and set up a time to meet with her. And I want to tell you, Keith, she was scared to death to meet with me.
She wrote you a letter, but she's what?
She was scared to death. She was so nervous, weren't you?
Oh, yes, definitely.
So nervous to meet me. And I
It's
don't know
okay.
why. I don't know why she was so nervous, but we met and we talked, and then we met again, and so we talk all the time now. But that very first meeting, she was scared to meet with me. I'm not sure why you were scared.
I think it's because of like the episode of my life that you were from. And at that time in my life, as far as like developmentally trying to get better, I was still in that mindset of like, I am not worth the time. I am not, I still like, I wondered how you were going to see me, since when you knew me, I was this dirty, grungy, like mouthy child. And so that first time I didn't know how you were going to be.
Yeah. And see, she was interpreting that I'm going to see her. I never saw her that way. I saw her as the brown haired, shoulder length girl with the brown eyes that were so sad, that I knew that needed help, who needed a friend. I was happy to be that. And, I've seen so many other children that way, but I never ever saw her as anything but that, and needing somebody to support her. That's all I ever saw.
Natalie, this is your best life now. Define that for us, please. What does it mean to be living your best life now, in your words?
in my words. So that it's kind of a long explanation, I guess. But people, I think there's like this huge like misunderstanding and like trauma work and stuff that, you know, the trauma goes away and everything gets perfect. And it's not that my life is perfect. It's that I've learned ways to cope and ways to deal with the good days and the bad days, and realize still on the bad days that the good far outweighs the bad. And I always try to, you know, do for others as I would want done for me or anybody that I loved. And, you know, to give my best in my job and to make sure I'm doing self-care as well. And just enjoying life, enjoying my dogs and my wife, and enjoying the fact and embracing the fact that I have loving support around me now. And I try to also be that loving support. The funniest thing happened the other day. It's just spreading kindness, leaving the world a better place than you found it, regardless of what religion you are. Like me personally, that's what I believe in. But I had somebody text me the wrong number the other day, and they're like, "Oh, is this James or somebody?" And I'm like, "No, this is Natalie." And they're like, "Oh my gosh, my grandma set me up on this blind date, blah, blah, blah. I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Girl, I hope you find the right number, and I hope you have a slam in time." And she's like, "Oh my goodness, you are so kind." And I'm like, "Girl, text me and tell me about it if you want." Just because I don't believe in being mean. Like somebody else might have been like, "Don't text me again." But I was just like, let me know how it goes. You know, just spreading kindness and being funny. I love humor. I love to laugh, that kind of thing. I did want to go back for a minute though, and where Brenda said, I forgot about that. I did look at those journals a lot because sometimes that was the only positive reinforcement that I would have. So that was something I had forgotten to mention. I'm glad you mentioned that, because sometimes going back and reading the things she said would be the only place I was going to get positive reinforcement.
Brenda, on your bio, you indicated that it's kind of your life's mission to be in service to others, especially children. Given that now that we know both of your stories, how does that service to others, and especially service to children, do you still do that? You know, is that part of who you are? Is that your reality? And how do you see yourself now that she's all grown up? What is that all about?
Yeah, I still see myself that way. I've always seen myself that way. I experienced something when I was in school, and where I didn't feel good and I didn't feel safe. And as I grew in my journey, um, I believe that no child should ever not feel good and not feel safe. And so I continue with that. I've written a book, and it's going to be out before the end of this year. But that's not all that I want to do. I have a website, and I write lots of things and share lots of things. And I want to make sure that every leader who is involved with serving children understands the importance of being able to talk with them and being able to support them. And like Natalie said, it just takes one person to say something and to do something to change. And that's all we have to do. And I believe homeschool and community, if we all work together, we can make so many differences in the lives of children. And I know, Keith, that you're working really hard at different conversations that you're having with different people, and you have a mission that you're wanting to achieve. And I think that that's such an important thing to do, because it's so easy for everybody to point out a problem, but it's not so easy to do something to find a solution. And I think that what you're doing is working on a solution for other people. And I think it's important with having these conversations, like with Natalie sharing her story. It can be done, and you can do those things. And I want to give you support. I don't want to profit from anything. What I want to see is more Natalie's making something,
We all do.
doing
Yeah.
something. Yeah, because she's a nurse and she's doing things and helping other people. I have other students who are doing great things. If you've ever lost a child, or if you've lost a student, you know what that is. And see, all the kids that I've ever had in school, they're my kids. I share them with their parents. And a lot of my parents will say, "You helped me raise my kids." And all right, we
Partly
did.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, we're partners. And I've lost a student to suicide. I know what that feels like, to go to that funeral and see the other two sisters and talk with the parents. I know what that feels like, and you can't get over that. I know what it's like to have a child die of violence, being shot by someone else the same age as them. I know what that is. So these conversations are important, and being able to help with the mental illness and health and awareness, stopping some of these things. I have only 2 rules that I focus on. And I think that those 2 rules, I know the strategies, I know how to find the solutions for these kids. And I'm so happy to be part of this conversation, and happy that Natalie could share her story, because really all we want is just for one person
Well, let
to
me
be.
ask, Natalie, what do you want somebody who's listening, whether it's a girl 13 years old or a mom, um, who lived the same life that you did and she's trying to figure things out now? What do you want to tell them to them, like specifically, not recapturing your story, but what would you
Right.
tell them about life?
I would definitely say probably the biggest thing I would say is tomorrow is another chance. Tomorrow is another day. If you messed up something today or something went wrong today, it's just a bad day. It's not a bad life. And, as far as parents go, is like, it might take more time to let your child learn on their own, but letting them learn on their own and standing behind them and supporting them, because that support goes so far, especially from the main person in a child's life, that parent they look to learn from and stuff. And so I guess that's the 2 biggest things I would say is just, it's not a bad life, it's just a bad day, and tomorrow is always a new chance to do something different.
So you said that you were a psychiatric nurse practitioner, or
No,
you
I'm a psych nurse.
oh, well, enlighten me, please. What is that?
So I am a registered nurse. I usually work in inpatient psychiatric units. They're usually locked. I have done forensic psychology, which is usually people who are considered not fit to stand trial or not guilty by reason of insanity. And so they are remanded to forensic psych facilities that are usually max security. And they either stay there until they are fit to stand trial, or they can become after a time civilly committed, or they can be found not guilty by reason of insanity, where which they automatically get the max sentence for whatever crime they have committed, and they stay in the facility until the end of that time. If they are still not mentally fit to be released, they may be held civilly at that point at intervals of, I believe, 180 days. But I also do regular, just like civil psychiatric units. I've also worked corrections. So I've done a couple of things. That's kind of where my heart is those 2 places. I feel like those are 2 places that we very much lack a lot of compassion, where compassion is needed.
Well, the point being is, with all your story now before us, why that profession? Like, how did the 2, where did they connect the dots for you?
So I've been a nurse for 7 years, and I tried so many things. Like, I tried hospital nursing, I tried long-term care, I tried all these things. And I accidentally, I say accidentally, I mean, do you really ever accidentally walk into a job? I tried prison nursing, and I loved it, because you're just treating them like other humans. People are like, ooh, inmates, they're scary. But when you walk among them, when you're part of their life, when you're giving them healthcare, when you're the one that's helping solve their problems, but you have to do so at a distance. You do see a lot of mistreatment sometimes by other people that want to judge them. And the reason I liked corrections is because it gave me a chance to, I can never become friends with them, but I can at least give them a chance to get the care they need without being judged. And I would always tell them that. People would be like, oh, do you know what so-and-so did? And I'd be like, I don't want to know. I am not here to be their judge, jury, and executioner. And the same thing happens in psychiatric nursing. Doctors in the ER who are like, oh, well, they're just being smartasses, or they're just acting out for attention, or, oh, they're just malingering. And it's like, no, they're actively psychotic. How did you talk to them for any more than 30 seconds? I have actually asked ER doctors that, like, as I've been assessment coordinating, like, how long did you talk to them for? Because when I was talking to them, they were talking to an empty corner, gesturing the cross at me, screaming at me about, like, close enough to hit me. I'm like, how long were you talking to them for? and then they're like, oh, okay, what are you going to admit them under? Well, psychosis. Okay, we'll plan on keeping them. So how do you go from they're just malingering to, okay, expect to keep them because they don't take the time? And that's, I want them to feel important because I know what it's like both to be seen in a negative light because you have mental health problems and to feel ignored when you do have mental health problems and to be judged for those things when it's no different than a broken leg or diabetes or anything else. Needing mental health is not a crutch. Yeah, it's like anything else. When you have high cholesterol, you take medication for high cholesterol. And so I guess that's just my way of giving back my compassion and understanding for those people having been where they have been and wanting to give back. Because again, for me, like I said earlier, all it takes is one person. And even if I never see that person again, I hope, if I help even one person in the smallest of ways, that's all I can ask for in a day.
I totally appreciate the fact that you recognize, and you said it with your own words, that we all need to approach mental health and the conversation around health, and this is not your word specifically, but we need to approach it differently. We need to approach it humanely. And that's kind of what the motivation behind the Envision Speaker Series is all about. So I appreciate you adding that to the conversation. With the time that we have left, how does one live their best life tomorrow? For both of you, what are you going to do tomorrow? What does it mean to live your best life tomorrow? What do you got going on? I know you've got a book, Brenda.
Mm-hmm.
Natalie,
I
what do you
do.
go? Well, go ahead. Tell me.
No, I just I wanted to go back and focus on the word judgment
Okay.
that Natalie brought up. I think that there's a lot of judgment that we do. So in order to live our best life, I think that judgment, we need to really think about that for ourselves in our lives, is that, what are we judging in our lives? And what are we basing that judgment on? I think that that's a crucial point. And I know, Keith, that you're working on making a difference with the mental health. And I think that when we think about, the changes that we need to make and the shifts that we're making, and I can see that there's some shifts being made, but I don't know if we're making all of the shifts we need to make. But that judgment is huge. And I want to make that point that we need to really think about that because it is really huge. Because I bet everybody who's watching would not know anything about me by hearing me talk and knowing that I've just written a book and I've gotten a publisher and I'm doing this talk and I've been this and I've been that. I bet they would not know that I have a traumatic brain injury. You wouldn't be able to see that, but I do, which has a whole nother set of things that have issues and a transition I had to make, and that I have implants. All of my teeth are implants because of the injuries I received.
Wow.
So you wouldn't be able to judge that, but see, you can't always see the things that are not there to see, but they're there. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to make sense of it, but I do get it.
Yeah.
And you are right. Yeah. Oh, I just
Yeah.
lost. Okay. Natalie?
I think that kind of follows too, like listening to what's not said too.
It is listening to what's not said. You're absolutely right. Go ahead.
I think that
Natalie.
is so important as well. Even in my practice is that, that is something I try to do is like, if I have somebody come in under, mysterious circumstances and something doesn't make sense, even if I cannot make heads or tails of what's going on, I always listen to what's not being said, which is somebody's body language. If somebody is like hemming and hawing around a topic or, something's not making sense, I always try to get as much information as I can about it, delve into notes of where they've talked to somebody else. Maybe they're not comfortable with me. Find somebody else to talk to them. Maybe I'm triggering to them. But I would say that both, not only just when I was a child, but even now in my practice now, I wish more people would have done that when I was younger, which was listening to what was not being said. Because obviously looking at me, Brenda could see that there was something going on with me, but I never told her what was going on, really what was going on with me. And I do the same thing. I try to look for, not that I look for problems, but I guess it's more of a solution based focus, I guess, where when something doesn't make sense, I try to seek it out and figure it out, follow my intuition, whether it be, possible suspicions of abuse and making sure I report that, because as a nurse, it's not my job to prove the abuse. It's just my job to report that it could be happening. Things like that, but just listening to what is not said to you. Because not everything's going to be easily said in life. Sometimes it's a trail to get there.
I usually ask at the end of a conversation, and I host a couple other different podcasts, conversations, for something motivational. And we've already done that, but how do you want to end this conversation? Because there's probably so much more that we can talk about. Today we don't have the time, but I do want to end this conversation on a very motivational, positive, enlightened moment. How do we do that?
Go ahead.
Oh no, you can go ahead. I guess for me, on to be enlightening, I guess the biggest thing I can say is like, just be kind to people. Always be kind. Even when I've been in bad areas, it's like I always look up and say hi to people, because I want people to feel like people. And I think for me, that's one of the biggest things is no matter where I'm at, I always say, hi, how are you? My name's Natalie. If I'm at work, or, hey, how are you? Or I hope you have a good day, or thank you, sir. Whether it's, the clerk at the gas station or wherever, whatever it is, if it's somebody dropped something on the ground at the supermarket and it's picking it up and saying, here you go. Or I was walking in the Walmart parking lot the other day and some kid was on crutches and he fell because it was raining, and I like ran over and I'm like, what can I do to help you? Do you want me to walk you to your car? Like, just being kind. Like, I was getting wet. I didn't care about that. I wanted to help this guy. I didn't know this person at all. I had never met him in my life. But I think just being kind is one of the biggest things you can do, because you never know, as I said earlier, how much one singular interaction with somebody can mean for somebody in that moment.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Brenda.
Yeah, I think I agree. Every day is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to make a difference in the life of another. So be the solution daily. I think that's been my key phrase for a long, long time. And so
Yes.
I'm very proud that she's saying the words that I feel like that's an echo from what she learned a long time ago. And I'm hoping that there's lots and lots of people like her that are saying those same things. And if it's not you, if you're not hearing those words and you're not saying those words, we have so much power in the words we use. Use them wisely each day and make a difference. That's what I say.
That's
And
perfect.
each day is a new chance for change.
That's perfect. Thank you both for joining me on this edition of the Envision Speaker Series. And for those of you out there in the audience, I'll see you next time. Take care.